Did I ever tell you that scam where the New York Times journalist got hundreds and hundreds of musicians to promote his book on oceanic politics for free? No, seriously, and that's not even the best part. To this day, he's made himself a collaborator and is collecting royalties for over 400 artists across Spotify, Bandcamp, and pretty much every music streaming service. And he's not even a musician. I've been wanting to make this video and slowly preparing to make it for over 2 years. And I should probably start with a few disclaimers. So first and foremost, while I can provide a citation for pretty much anything that I say in this video, whether it be public information or an email or a chat log or a screenshot or reputable hearsay or a contract, all of these things are forming my opinion. I've also decided to go out of my way to not tell you anything that can be cited from an email or a private conversation where one of the parties assumed some form of confidentiality. And I'm also not going to be mentioning any artists by name. In addition to this, any copyrighted material that I'm using in this video is either my own, something I have permission to use, or something that is very, very clearly fair use. And if you want to challenge that, understand that you're doing so under penalty of perjury. Okay, did I say it all properly? Wait, that's not covered by your retainer? You should know that I, in all of my music industry wisdom, totally fell for this scam. Now, I didn't follow through with it entirely, but I did get my hopes up and I did spend a lot of time writing music for this project. And ultimately, it was a huge waste of valuable time. All these S words, scam, scheme, swindle, are very harsh because when you first hear them, they paint this antagonist with an evil nature that preys on people. And while that is sometimes the case, greed and even business are just more complicated than that. The reason I'm using these words is because when you take the information that I'm about to tell you and compare it to Merriam-Webster's definition of them, it's accurate. Deceiving people and gaining something from that deceit is scamming or swindling. It's worth mentioning in all fairness that not every single artist involved in this project feel like they were scammed. Some of that could be pride, but it also could just be that they don't really care that much about the financial details and they were happy to work on the project. And that's great. It's worth reminding ourselves that there are a lot worse things you could be doing with your time than writing music. And this is not at all me saying that they are stupid for being involved. If you are happy being on this project and are happy with how everything went, good for you. That's amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. So this all began for me in May of 2019. My booking agent, Brent, got an email titled, "An odd question from a newspaper reporter. No, this is not spam, nor is it a bot." Hi, Brent. Forgive me for the out-of-left-field nature of this email, but I'm contacting you relating to the flashbulb. My name is Ian Urbina, and I work for the New York Times. Here's my bio. I'm contacting you not for an interview per se, but because I want to run an idea by you that I think will be of great interest. I've been a fan of Ben's for a while. My idea concerns using music to empower storytelling. In this case, the reporting on the outlaw ocean, which you can see here, with the link to the successful New York Times series. I wondered if you might have a couple minutes to chat by phone, or if you prefer, I can elaborate on my vision by email. Let me know, Ian. This was actually pretty intriguing to me. I was vaguely familiar with the New York Times series on oceanic reporting, and this sounded like this established journalist happened to be a big fan of my music and he wanted to work together on a big upcoming project. So tell me more. And he did. So he is referring to an upcoming book that is about to be released. The idea I had is to create a soundtrack for the book. By that, I don't mean putting music behind the audiobook. Instead, I mean teaming up with an artist to create music that tells stories and conveys the feelings and issues in the book. I am doing this entire audio idea as a passion project, so there is no upfront money. That said, there will be a lot of interest and thus online traffic royalties on it once we create it. Spotify is building a podcast around it as they are intrigued by its innovative nature of this idea. Netflix and Knopf, a publisher who are both creating things tied to this book, are eager to promote the soundtrack. Therefore, the album would assuredly get a lot of attention and recognition, if only because it has never been done before. If this still interests you at all, please let me know and we can chat by phone. Now, this is where I should have immediately raised an eyebrow and demanded a contract guaranteeing these things in a specific way in place of financial compensation. For example, because so much was being promised in promotional terms, I could have demanded that if if this album doesn't perform 20% better than the mean average of my albums in the following year after its release, then I would be compensated $2,500 per song and released from the contract. But instead, I was just so charmed that I was handpicked by this established journalist and author that I had a long phone conversation with him and entered hearsay territory when we talked about the details. In this conversation, I was told that a record label called Synesthesia Media was going to be handling all of the promotion and that they were going to be putting over $50,000 into promoting the album. And because of this, this record label would be keeping 50% of all sales and streaming royalties, which, if you watched my 3 scams video, you'll know that that is 100% of the sync license, which is the most you can possibly take from a musician in the United States. This rubbed me the wrong way, and I pushed back a little bit, but I was repeatedly assured that it was due to the massive investment that Synesthesia and Ian were making to promote our project. And with Ian being such a big fan of my music and acting kind of starstruck to be talking to me on the phone, and this project fitting me so well, I naturally assumed that it was a partnership between the two of us and never even thought to ask if there were other artists involved. But then I got my contract. The parties shall receive credit with respect to the recordings in substantially the form, song, written and performed by the Flashbulb and Ian Urbina, performed by the Flashbulb, courtesy of Synesthesia Media. Wait, what? Publishing. Each of the parties shall own 50% of the copyright in and to the compositions, and Synesthesia shall be the sole administrator and act as the publisher of all compositions hereunder. Synesthesia have the right in its sole discretion to license, dispose of, or otherwise exploit, such as publishing rights, copyright, or any other rights hereunder. So let me get this straight. If I buy this book, decide a specific passage inspires me, go into my fucking recording studio using my 30 years of experience and write something for free for this project, it's billed as a collaboration between myself and Ian Urbina? Furthermore, if Synesthesia Media decides to license a song to Netflix or the theme song for Lucky Charms cereal, they get to keep all of the sync license fee and royalties? Well, with all the Spotify and Netflix and Google and New York Times and so on promises in these emails, this Synesthesia company has their work cut out for them. Otherwise, you could simply nullify them. No obligation. Nothing contained in this agreement shall be construed to obligate Synesthesia to incorporate the compositions or recordings in the work or any other work. There it is. To me, this is nothing more than high-level, clever panhandling. Hey there, somewhat popular artist making a meager living off of music streaming. Can I have some of your paycheck for nothing in return? That's literally what this contract is doing. To be fair, Ian Urbina did allow artists to use some of the sound effects that he recorded at sea if they chose to do so, which I guess in some very forgiving and technical way makes him an artistic collaborator, and I suppose is the justification for him appearing to be the most prolific musician on earth if you search his name on any music streaming service. Even if so, that is easily the most draconian demand I've ever heard being applied to the use of a sound effect. But this gets super interesting and tricky, because even in Ian's own description of his sound library, the first example that he uses is chanting Cambodian boys pulling nets. Well, wait a minute. You record the performance of children chanting in one of the world's poorest countries and just automatically assume ownership of the master side of that license to the point where you relicense it out as your own valuable asset that you negotiate with? That's not how copyright law works at all. So I, and many of the other artists involved, believed that they were either the only artist or one of a very small group picked to do this. I was contacted by a fan of mine who is another artist involved with the project, saying that Ian name-dropped me in his conversation on the phone, and he's excited to be working alongside me. Then another artist contacted me, and then some more did, and some of them shared emails similar to the correspondence I had, which neglected to mention any other artists' involvement. Others had information saying that there were about a dozen artists involved. Well, guess how many artists signed the agreement with Synesthesia? All of them got the same email about Ian being a fan of theirs and the whole spiel about the budget being tied up in promotion, but Netflix and Spotify and New York Times and blah, blah, blah. All of them signed the same contract with Synesthesia Media with no obligation specified. And now a whole lot of these artists were figuring this out for themselves and frankly, were really bummed out for being misled. I was excited about the project, and getting any new gig or offer is a little validating for me, but for some of these artists, they thought that this was their first time being discovered or their big break in the music industry. And in some of the emails shared with me, there's a whole FAQ that he made, and by the way, some of that FAQ is copy pasta to the personal email he sent me. Several media outlets have asked to cover the project. I also know that Netflix and Knopf, who are creating things tied to the book, are eager to promote the soundtrack. Therefore, the album would most assuredly get a lot of attention and recognition, if only because it has never been done before. There's even a live performance carrot being dangled out. I've been approached by a company that hosts events and tours. They proposed an idea in which we might consider hosting a large event in which we pack a sizable venue with great audio and visual capacity, and we have the musician, me, and possibly also my Brazilian photographer, videographer. The musician imagines being recorded by a professional videographer playing a massive event to a sold-out audience, being supported by all of these big companies and this world-famous journalist. And guess what? 2 years later, not one of these things happened. No Netflix series or promotion, no Google page, no real support from the New York Times or the book's publisher. Ian does have an Outlaw Ocean Spotify podcast, but it doesn't include or make any mention of the music. But where this reaches Ocean's 11 levels of deceit is when you consider that all of these musicians aren't even keeping the majority of the income that their own fucking music generated. They are paying for the privilege to promote a stranger's book. More literally than figuratively, by the way, when you consider that the artist's royalty payments are withheld behind the promotional expenses. And that other 50% plus promotional retainer goes to Synesthesia Media, a record label or company that nobody knows anything about until now. In 2019, I was told, well, here, actually, I'll just read you Ian himself describing his relationship with Synesthesia to me. We are working with Synesthesia Media, which will handle distribution. We also have a special relationship set up with DistroKid to get extra attention in the rollout of this music. Synesthesia is dedicating $50,000 to promote and market the project. There will be a 50-50 split on the publishing and master between the two creative collaborators, who I assume is the artist and Ian for supplying the recording of the boat or something. Synesthesia will handle distribution, promotion, marketing, branding, and legal on behalf of the project. Another, looping in Charlotte from Synesthesia, who helps me keep track of the project. Pretty much every reference to Synesthesia would leave you to assume that, despite not having a website at the time, it was a company that Ian had partnered with to manage the music distribution. But then as time goes on and more artists get involved, things start getting even more complicated. You have this VIP deal with DistroKid that was consistently mentioned, and then Warner Music was distributing it and taking 8% or 10% or up to $400, but not over $100. What I saw in what was shared to me by some of these artists, this 50-50 split is more like, well, literally 98.6%, 1.3% split. Naturally, with the musician getting 1.3% for pretty much doing 100% of the work. Throughout the last year, a lot of these artists have complained about not even getting any of the accounting for Spotify or Apple Music, only Bandcamp. And even then, none of the numbers add up. If they made a few $100, then they got a few dollars due to negative balances carried over that had no explanation. So I looked up Synesthesia Media LLC's business license, and their offices were at a residential address in Washington, D.C. I pulled the tax records of that address, and it was a single-family home owned by a woman named Sherry Rusher. Sherry Rusher is somebody who Ian thanks in his book because it's his wife. Now, of course, I am not saying that Ian Urbina incorporated his own limited liability company to manage his own publicity and royalty scheme and then referred to them repeatedly as a third party managing the distribution of the music, but never mind, that's exactly what I'm saying because that's exactly what he fucking did. I, for example, have written and produced 16 albums, and I have about 165,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. And from Spotify, I make about $2,200 a month. give or take. Ian Urbina, on the other hand, has written and produced no music at all and has 743,000 monthly listeners. The reason that most of these artists participated in this project is because they were promised vast amounts of publicity and promotion, and none of that ever seemed to materialize, nor did it have to because of the obligation clause in the contract. A lot of the things that I've said in this video have been very conservative estimates to be as fair as possible, but over the course of these last 2 years, and especially since I started making this video, a lot of people have come forward with their own bad experiences with Ian Urbina and the project. And as of right now, there is allegedly over 600 artists involved. There has allegedly been thousands of musicians that Ian has contacted about this project, and I thought that he had some sort of personal connection to some of their music, even if it was in a slight way, but I've heard from some former interns who were asked to basically just go through some lo-fi playlists and supply this information for him. It's worth pointing out that all of this is still going on, and he's still contacting artists, and there's still Outlaw Ocean releases that are being released. But what's really shitty is that now he started something called the Noam Chomsky Music Project, where he is now contacting artists saying, let's make some music that is inspired by Noam Chomsky. And this Noam Chomsky Music Project has absolutely nothing to do with Ian's writing or journalism. And it seems like he's just recruiting artists using a famous author's name and then sticking his name up to it on Spotify or whatever streaming platform and then pocketing the money with synesthesia. This could very well be due to my lack of journalistic experience or resources. But when Ian recruits people for the Outlaw Ocean Project, he claims that it is working under a nonprofit. I've been unable to find any sort of evidence that this is an actually licensed nonprofit business, and it certainly isn't a 501c3. As somebody who personally ran a nonprofit for years, there is a whole lot of red tape that you have to work around, and one of the biggest legal responsibilities that you have to abide by is public transparency. So while I can't find any official business licenses or a list of board members for this nonprofit, I can find an uncommon giving page where you can donate money to the Outlaw Ocean Project and Ian directly. At this point in the video, you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, some of these musicians should lawyer up. But musicians are not the only people who are in a dispute with Ian. Some of the companies who distribute music to places like Spotify and Bandcamp have claimed that they have not been paid as agreed to by Ian. And, well, let's just say that lawyers might already be involved. So that, my friends, is how a New York Times journalist ended up creating a marketing scheme that resulted in him collecting the majority of royalties for an immense collection of music that he did not write. If you were involved in this project, understand that this is an extremely unexpected, brazen, complex web of f***ery, and if you feel disenchanted or that you've been treated unfairly, you absolutely have every right to be angry and demand more transparency, and frankly, more money. Now for the part of the video that I hate, that has kept me on the verge of not even making it, because I know inevitably Ian is going to be watching it. So, Ian, up until 2019, I really, really respected your work and your life's purpose. It's unique, it's brave, it's important, and despite all of this bullshit, I'm going to go to the extent of recommending my viewers read your work, specifically with your New York Times series, which I'll link to below, because it's frankly outstanding. I don't think that you rubbed your hands together in some dark basement and concocted this plan to fuck over a bunch of musicians. I think it's entirely possible that over time, you let yourself believe that this would help their career as much as it helped yours. But in that process, you were very dishonest and deceptive, and I experienced the fallout of that by talking to dozens of disenchanted and disappointed artists who frankly felt like they were swindled. And all of this happened on the back of so many other schemes to take advantage of musicians' time and resources in a time when they can't even make money from performing. If it was just me that felt this way, I'd never spend the time making this video. Your innovative music meets journalism vision worked out quite well, but only for you. And in my personal opinion, you owe an apology to most of the artists who participated in this. And you should also negate their contracts and let them upload the music that they themselves wrote and keep whatever royalty or sale is left for them to make. And if you do that, I'll do everything I can to promote it. And with permission, I'll even stream this music on this channel in some sort of live event to try and generate some extra sales and streams for all of these artists, because there is some incredibly good music there. If there's any ultimate takeaway that I want my viewers to have from this video, it's that no matter who contacts you, this is a red flag. The vague promise of promotion, very, very rarely ever pans out. It doesn't matter if you've been a professional musician for decades or if you're just starting out as a hobby. If somebody is asking you to hand over your intellectual property and not offering you anything tangible in return for it, consider that an insult, because what they're insinuating is that your time and experience doesn't have value. And it f***ing does. Hey, if you like this video, subscribe to my channel. If there's anything you want me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments. If you want access to a large, thriving community that has everything from game servers to monthly music making challenges to audio assets to unreleased music that you hear on this channel, then my Patreon is for you, and you could join for as little as $1. All right, I'm out. Bye.